Okay, you've trained all winter for your sub-3 marathon. You've hit your long runs, your pace is dialed in, and then bang, race day hits and it's 10 degrees hotter than anything you've trained in. What do? Do you slow down? Do you hold pace? Do you go for it? Do you panic? Most runners get this wrong, and it's why they blow up at mile 18. But today, I'm going to show you how you can adjust smartly so that you walk away proud and not broken. I'm Lee Grantham, a coach and a professional ultra runner who went from running a marathon in 4 hours and 25 minutes to running a marathon in 2 hours and 21 minutes and representing my country for both the marathon and the ultra marathon. And I've had some spectacular failures. I've gone for it and it's just not worked out. And in the same way, there are days in marathons where I've gone for it and it has worked out, and that allowed me in just an 11-month period to take my marathon time from 3 hours and 25 to 2 hours and 37 minutes. That's a 48-minute jump in just 11 months. And if you have that work ethic and discipline that's dialed in, and you want to make massive gains in your marathon, then please get in contact by booking a call in the link in the description. In the last 3 weeks alone, we've seen athletes at Boston, at London Marathon, at Manchester, put in flawless training blocks and then get to race day and crumble. Why? Because they've trained through the dark winters, the cold winters. They get to race day, temperatures are spiked, it's an April spring day that they're just not ready for, and all of a sudden the perceived effort of race pace goes through the roof and they find themselves at mile 15 to 20 in all sorts of problems. But let's be clear, you haven't failed. You were just playing a different game and using the wrong rules. If you train in cool weather and then race in the heat, the body just isn't ready for that additional stress. Your heart rate is higher, your sweat rate increases, and you overheat faster, even if you're running at exactly the same pace as you were in a specific training run just a few weeks before. And that's the key. It's not the pace that has changed, it's the effort. And again, you've not failed. Every athlete and coach athlete has this problem of how to adjust for race day. So I get it. You get to Boston or you get to London, you've trained all winter, and let's say you're going for that 4:15 per kilometer or 6:52 per mile, that sub-3 marathon. Today's the day, or that's gonna be the day that I hit it. You get to race day and it's really difficult to adjust, especially if you've done the training right and you've done a lot of miles or kilometers at exactly target pace. And the common mistakes are, and there's a debate as to whether these are actually mistakes, are you go for goal pace anyway. You slow down, you adjust the pace down, but without confidence because you're not used to running at that slower pace for sustained periods of time. And inevitably, you end up getting to 20 miles or 33K and either walking it in or survival mode until the finish, which is of course gonna elongate your recovery. So let's fix this, because it's not about giving up on your goal. It's about adjusting and literally playing the hand that you're dealt on that day. Not easy to do, but I'll show you the best way to do it. And I was having this conversation this week with one of my athletes, and it's a really interesting topic because whether you're running 2:05, 3:05, 4:05, everyone has the same problem. And it's April. So that marathon can always throw you a curveball. Boston, I think 2018 or 2019, when Yuki won, the Japanese guy, torrential rain. But more often than not, it can throw you that hot day, which hurts more than ever because it's been such a cold winter. And David, my athlete, was saying, well, it's okay for an elite athlete. It's okay for you as a professional because you can go for it, risk failing, and it doesn't matter because you've got another race. And from an amateur perspective, 4 to 6 month build up, a lot of time invested, you've got to work that around your work, and then you want to get a result. And so initially I thought I have to wrap my head around that. But in actual fact, it's very similar to an elite athlete. And you will have seen a lot of people at London and maybe Boston and Manchester going for a qualifying time. And there's a cutoff date. And so they need to run that time. And so they're in a position where they've got no other choice but to go for it. And they know that the circumstances, the conditions are against them. But the best way I can answer this is to think about the days when it's just been my job to get to a race and win the race. And the conditions have been horrible, it's been incredibly hot, it's not conducive of a fast time for the course, And so it's an all-out race. And so in exactly the same way, whatever you've trained for, that specific pace, that's out of the window because it's no longer about the pace. It's no longer about the finish time. It's just about the win. So as an elite athlete, you actually become pretty good at this because if you think about it like a Tour de France rider, it's about spending the least amount of energy that you possibly can and getting the win. And if you reframe that, your win is your PB or your sub-3 marathon, whatever it is you're aiming for. And of course, if it's plus 10 degrees, it's much hotter, that perfect race all of a sudden needs adjusting, and therefore you can come out with a time that's 10 minutes slower or 15 minutes slower and still have won based on the hand that you were dealt. Based on that curveball, for me, you've still hit it out of the park. And when those conditions do become perfect for you, and they will, you've put in a really good performance, which will then indicate that you're capable of much faster in perfect conditions. So what's the solution? So let's take a marathon-specific long run, as simple as 60 miles or 25K, 3 miles easy on the beginning, 3 miles easy on the end, and 10 miles in the middle at marathon pace. Let's say we're aiming for that 2 hour 59 marathon, so we're aiming for 4:15 per kilometer pace or 6:52 per mile. If you can hold that for 10 miles and then have the progressions over the weeks leading up to the race, we're in a pretty good spot, right? What you're really testing is this. Can I hold marathon effort sustainably? So let's say you run those 10 miles at 4:15 per kilometer or 6:52 per mile, and it feels controllable within yourself. And you didn't see the heart rate drift up too much, and so that would make it unsustainable, then brilliant. That's your marathon effort, and that's something we're building upon towards race day. And so let's look at the two common mistakes again. You get to race day, you've trained all winter in the cold, it's a hot day, you go for it anyway. What's likely to happen? Your heart rate is gonna go through the roof. Your sweat rate is gonna be off the charts. You're gonna overheat. It's gonna feel easy to begin with or slightly harder than usual. You're gonna find out about it between 15 and 20 miles. And you know that before you start, you're just hoping that you can find something on the day. The second mistake that I mentioned was you adjust the pace. So let's again say you're aiming for that sub-3 marathon. So instead of running 4:15 per kilometer, you say I'm gonna run 4:25 per kilometer or 15 seconds less per mile. Where has that come from? And so immediately from the start line, from the gun, you're running at a pace which again feels very easy to begin with, but if you're honest with yourself, it's 10 seconds per kilometer or 15 seconds per mile less. It's not much harder, and it's a figure you've just plucked out of the air. So the golden rule on race day is run at the effort that you can sustain for the marathon, which you figured out from the training. You figured out the pace, and that's been your primary indicator, but you've also figured out the effort. And I've done this to a point where I'll change my Garmin settings so all I can see is my heart rate, because really that's all that matters. You've got a certain capacity that you can hold for the entire duration. That's what you've been training your engine, your heart and lungs to do. And so the safest way to hit this curveball out of the park is to go on effort. And it's not just plucked out of the air. This is proven effort based on your training. And what this also means, if you think about it, is all that training has not gone to waste. And yes, the day has dealt you a curveball. It's hotter, you're not going to achieve a PB, but you're not comparing apples with apples. And as I said before, if you run from start to finish at 165 beats, for example, and maybe in the last 10K, 6 miles, you're able to up that a little bit to finish a little bit quicker, that would then indicate that once the conditions are perfect, you can put together that PB race. And this is why heart rate, perceived effort, and the training data really matter. Because when you get dealt this card, this curveball, you have the answers. The difficult part is the discipline and actually listening and moving the ego out of the way. I'll give you another example which will also be useful to you and is also relevant to Boston. What if you've got a hillier marathon and you've always been training in flatter territory? The often asked question is, how do I judge the pacing on the uphills and the downhills? And the simple answer is, you don't need to judge the pacing. You judge the effort. And you want to get to a point with marathon pace, that's what you're focused on, that you don't even need to look down at your watch. You know you're running at that effort level and that pace. And so again, whether the course is pancake flat like Berlin or Valencia, or it's super hilly like Boston or Madrid, then again, you're not going to be able to run your fastest time when it's hillier. Boston's a bit different because it's a net downhill. But at Madrid, the winning time is 4 or 5 minutes slower than what it would be at London, for example. And so to expect to go there and run a personal best is a bit crazy. But you can run to that effort level and run a great race. And of course, if you're running a hilly course, downhill, uphill, you want to get used to that simulated course in your training too. So the reality check is this. As a marathon runner, I feel that I'm preparing myself to deal with problems on the go. I'm preparing myself to execute no matter what the conditions. But you've got to be smart about that. And so if you're aiming for 2 hours 59:59 and you have to run to effort and you smartly judge that based on your training and you come out with a 3:5 or a 3:10 marathon, you've got to reframe that in your head to actually be a success based on the day and what the day has dealt you. What we're really doing is training to understand our body. We're training our heart and our lungs, our engine, so that we can run over the ground faster and the body will follow. We're training to understand the effort that we can put in for sustained periods of time. And you become so accustomed to that, as I said before, you don't even need to look at your watch. You know you're moving at the pace that you can sustain for the next 2 hours or 3 hours. You're learning how your body reacts to heat, to hills, to the different situations you get in running. And at the same time, we're training as effectively as we possibly can to be as fast as we can on one morning on one day. And we're training as if we're trying to run a PB every single time. Of course we're training like that, but it's not always going to happen in exactly the same way that life doesn't always go our ways. We're going to get those curveballs. And that's character. The way that we respond to those situations, that's true character. Just as a side note, I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing if you go for it and the wheels fall off at 35K or 20 miles or whatever. It's humbling and it's a good experience to have. And my best performance periods have always come off the back of a disastrous attempt where I've been humbled by the marathon. So if you feel like you failed recently at a marathon, then in actual fact, now is the perfect time to regroup and go even faster. Good luck. And I'll put on the screen for you a couple of long runs that will specifically get you ready to run your fastest marathon.